Steve, episode 49 of the Broadway block. Today we're going to talk about who's your favorite Rangers prospect, who had the worst offseason in the NHL, and are we getting a reverse retro this year, Jersey, or what? Third alternate? That's awesome.
Third alternate would be cool. I really like the old ones though, so maybe
The
just another
Lady Liberty?
Yeah, I think it was nice. I actually was thinking about getting it. The black one there is just kind of my way of getting that same sort of color scheme, but I do like them. I think that logo is a staple and a mainstay, but maybe the jersey changes up a little bit. Who had the best off or the worst off season in the NHL?
I'm going to go. Here's my list. Top three worst off seasons, starting with number three. I'm going to go with the Blackhawks. You know why? Because they didn't really decide what they're doing. Full rebuild, not rebuild. They traded off some of their best prospects, but didn't really get that much for it, and then didn't trade their veterans. Number two, Philadelphia Flyers. Had Johnny Hockey ready to go, couldn't get
Did
him
they
to
though?
sign because they didn't have the cap space, and then the only defenseman they get is Tony DeAngelo, and again they overpaid for him. And then my last is the Devils. They also missed out on Johnny Hockey. So what did they do? They panicked, and then they signed Andre Palat, which we've talked about a little bit, which is a good free agent pickup, but I think they overpaid for him a little bit. Then the other thing that I also didn't like is Mackenzie Blackwood for them has had a little bit of injury history, hasn't had a good defense in front of him, really hasn't had the full opportunity. And then they only signed Vanacek from the Caps. What? That's how you're going to address it? He struggled in Washington. Washington blew him out. They got Darcy Kemper now. They were completely happy about upgrading. Dev's yeah, we'll take the scraps, no problem. Who do you got as your three worst off seasons?
Let's not ignore the fact that the Avalanche are not better on paper. I think they lose Kadri and they gain Gorgiev. So it's they're a worse team. I'm not gonna say that they had a bad offseason. They shored up players that they needed to. They had to hand out some extensions, but they don't look as, not to say as scary. They're certainly scary. But I think they've gotten just a notch low. But if we're gonna talk bad off seasons, I'm sure you want something like a real cellar dweller. The Coyotes haven't done anything to help out their position.
Would that be your number three then? Let's do
I,
your
I'm
three
now
worst.
I'm just kind of thinking about who's in the league that hasn't done anything. I don't remember the Kraken really doing anything that's very eye moving. I mean, they drafted Shane Wright, but I mean, you almost have to at that point. He's slipped to four, and the Montreal Canadiens. I mean, I don't think they really made any moves that made them a better hockey club as well. And the Canes, if you really want to talk about that, losing Pacioretty to start the year after making what a fleecing of a deal we were talking about, he's going to be out for, I think it's at 6 months. So the Canes, in my opinion, they're now without that second line center spot. They're going to feel the loss of Trocheck, I think, regardless. And
You don't
Tony,
think Brent Burns is an upgrade compared to Tony DeAngelo for them?
no, I think he put up some points for them. I don't know necessarily if he's not an upgrade, but I don't think that they've upgraded their team as opposed to seemingly. They seem like they were at about even, and then losing Pacioretty right before the season starts is, I'm going to put them as a notch below where
But
they
it's
were.
not for the whole season, I heard. It's only for the
Yeah,
first
but then
three
he's got to
months.
get chemistry. He's got to find his way into the club. Who knows that somebody else hasn't, Jordan Stahl or someone else hasn't filled up that gap a little bit. So, I mean, it remains to be seen, because they just felt to me like a very deep team, late and as well as the Avalanche. So, talk about some top heavy teams that maybe got a little bit lighter in their load would be, in my opinion, the Hurricanes and the Avalanche, and then I would say some cellar dweller teams, the Canadiens, the Kraken. I mean, you said the
Well,
Flyers.
you
As far as
gotta list three. Who's your three? Starting with number three, worst off season. Who you got?
worst, I'm a little annoyed that the Avalanche are gonna fall apart a little bit, but I can't really call that bad because it's just a cap casualty. Let's say, and I have to disagree with you about the Devils, man. I think that they've gotten better, and I think that they're going to be in contention for maybe not a playoff spot,
They
but they're going
didn't
to
even
play.
address the coach.
I don't think. that right now is an important. I look at them the way that I look at us a few years ago, whereas like you need to make you can't make huge waves right now. But who knows what they're feeling from an organizational pressure. I would put the Flyers up there, at least in the top three. Yeah,
So we
Buffalo.
got Blackhawks, Flyers, and then who had the worst offseason for you, Steve?
See, like the Blackhawks, I would have to agree with you, but did they get? I mean, they got worse by losing DeBrincat, but did they do something bad for their organization by getting rid of a star that they won't really be able to roll out the red carpet for? You know what I mean? Like like he was probably going to walk. You know, if there wasn't an attractive spot in a couple of years for him to be at. So they probably did the smarter thing. So I don't necessarily want to, because they're in rebuild mode right now. Because maybe Patrick.
Yeah,
Kane
but that's that was my point. Like, if you're in rebuild mode, then like you're selling the guys that are the oldest and the veterans. Like, I guess it's more of a respect thing to like, keep Tays and Patrick Kane around, but those would be my first guys I would have sold. Then piecing the other prospects that we got in with DeBrincat and the like that, and then going like, trading those guys if like, the chemistry's not going with the prospects, seeing what you got, maybe mid-season trading those guys when other teams lose people towards injuries and such along those lines. So that's where I'm at, like a loss, where I'm watching the organization and I'm thinking, but wouldn't you sell the older cars first and then go to the other ones?
I think Kane is like, okay, I would agree with you that DeBrincat's maybe the piece you build around, and Kane is maybe the piece that, but I guess there's something to be said about when we stripped it all, how dishonest and how hard was that? I feel like as an organization to get rid of all the pieces that, maybe if there's a Zook in the locker room, you feel like there isn't that like awkward stage in the, because now you've put an awkward stage into the rebuild. I'm talking about the Blackhawks still, where you've sort of hinted at your direction, but the season before you're trading for Jones, and the season later you're trading for a pick that was basically the same, the 6th pick and the 7th pick, and you get rid of a guy like DeBrincat, who's probably going to score 40 goals in Ottawa, let's be honest, and you keep around a guy, the heritage guys like Kane, and I feel like the star allure to them is gone, and no one's going to want to come to your team just to play with those guys. Even though
also, what if they have a terrible season? Then you're just kind of like tarnishing their legacy in there because you surrounded them with young prospects and like, yeah, they're there, but it's like they're not the same players. They're not getting the same respect from the league when they go in and day out. All right, so forget the Blackhawks. Who had the worst season for you, Steve? Obviously, you're not that keen on that one.
The Flyers to me keep standing out, but I don't think that's just so. Like another comparable one, the Islanders are basically in the same boat as the Flyers, where they really haven't gotten better in any regard. I mean, the biggest thing for me is having that plan when you walk into, like, what did Drury have, right? We shored up our needs minute one of free agency, right? So it goes to show you that we went into it having a plan. And I feel like, Chuck Fletcher, Lou Lamoriello, they kind of went into this offseason with maybe less of a plan, and it's showing. And I'll definitely put those two up there. The Islanders.
Well, you can only do 3. So we got the Avalanche for you, and between the Islanders and the Flyers, who's number 2?
Well, again, I'm just making the point that I think the Avalanche are not as good of a team. And you can say the same thing about the Florida Panthers. You can say the same thing about the Carolina Hurricanes. When you're that good, the wealth kind of has to get distributed because it's hard to replicate that over season and over season. But I think you want a cellar dweller. I think you want a team that is not good already. And probably the Kraken, because they haven't done anything.
So that's your number one worst.
They were one of the worst. One of the worst teams I've ever watched play hockey this year. So yeah, I would say that they're up there. Number one is
Kraken, Flyers, Avalanche. Is that what you got?
No, boot the Avs out, because I was just making the point that I think they're not as scary, but I think that the Islanders and the Flyers had a worse strategy for sure. Because the Avalanche this was just a byproduct. They were gonna lose people. The Islanders didn't have to go into the offseason and not do anything. The Devils, to your point, didn't have to, go with their plan B type of strategy. So a lot of these guys, it's just sort of short-sightedness. But it's kind of funny, man. I don't know how many teams. Like, I guess what's a shorter list is what's a 3-team list of teams that you think got better in the offseason? Because in my opinion, it's a much shorter list than the teams that have gotten worse.
Well, I originally thought the Canes got better with the Pacioretty, and I personally think Brent Burns is better than Tony DeAngelo. He doesn't bring as much drama. There's people in the league that just like Brent Burns for who he is, so they're gonna switch over to watch him on the Canes. So
But you're
I
just
think,
swapping out two pieces at that point. It's Pacioretty for Trocheck and DeAngelo for Burns. It's like, did that make you a better team? Is
yeah,
that
but
really
look, they finished first in the Metropolitan last year. Like there wasn't, when you
Who's
have
saying
a
the
team
room
like
to
that,
improve?
you only make the small tweaks, so that's not really. You don't sell all your players. They let Trocheck go. They brought in Pacioretty. D'Angelo, they really didn't want to give him anything more than that year. It was kind of an experiment. He definitely provided a different aspect for them, a more shooting defenseman, was good on the power play for them. So they figured, let's bring in Brent Burns. Minus losing to us, maybe they would have fared better against the Lightning than a weaker Lightning team than we've seen in the past couple of years.
I had them for what it's worth. My bracket was essentially unbusted minus a falling out in the West. That I had the Canes actually beating us, going on to beat the Bolts, and then going on to lose to the Avalanche. So I mean, I would have put them above where the Bolts were at, especially not having a point type player. Really, I think hurt the Bolts' case of being a really deep team. Because again, I feel like the Canes were just so deep. We did what we did. We did a tremendous effort against both the Penguins and the Canes, but I think that the Canes were one of the deepest teams that last season.
Well, I think the Canes also have to address that if they are ever going to go anywhere, then they're going to have to win some playoff games on the road.
Yeah,
So
that was pretty crazy.
That's you're going to go no matter what series you are, the Stanley Cup, the Eastern Conference Finals, you are going to have to win games on the road. So that's
and
where
no disrespect to the Bolts, by the way. I mean, that coming back to win 4 in a row, that just shows you the championship team that they are, and that the heart and soul of that team.
Cooper's a good team. He kept people from not panicking. Let's keep playing our game. We figured out, that I think it was a true point when was that Stamkos in that game 2 post-game interview was we kind of figured a little bit out of their game. So we're going to go home. We're going to study tape. We're going to execute that. And I think Cooper, the veteran leadership of having Stamkos and those kinds of players, and then Cooper being there, had been there before, that really helped them out. Okay, so we're both on the Canes got better. We'll see what happens with the Pacioretty thing. Who's next on your list of another team that's gotten better this year?
Again, I don't know how much better I would say that the Canes have gotten. I think that off-season moves they did, but this injury is going to prove to be, I feel like, a massive, massive deal, and almost diminishes the off-season that they had, in my opinion. Because there was really only 2 moves, but not to harp on them. As far as Boston managing to sign, Bergeron to, that's something I really dislike, by the way. I feel like that contract is just raising so many red flags, and this is just going to start a whole wave of unfortunate events in the NHL. But you got Bergeron signing for $2.5 million. And I hate it because if you think about Philip Hedl makes $2.3 million.
Yeah, no one's coming to New York and signing for 2.5. I'm still mad about the haggling thing back in the day, that then he's playing for Pittsburgh for pennies and helping them. It's he wanted to hit us with, give me that New York City money. We never get someone like that.
And how is that not illegal? You got salary arbitration for a reason when a player is not making enough money. And then they bring up statistics, and they bring up past conversations, and they bring up draft order, and they take all this stuff into consideration. They go, this is what you're worth. Your party is at 4 million. They're at 6 million, and we think 5.5 is right where you ought to be compared to everybody else in the league. How do they not bring up the fact that, and how is there not a rule in place for a
Yeah, but
player
I don't think there should be a rule. Like, Hank should have given us that hometown discount, but we didn't get it. We're just mad because we don't get the hometown discount from people.
if Panarin signed for $3 million, I would be the first to admit that this should not happen, but I cannot wait to win the Stanley Cup. Not only would I celebrate the team, I would be openly honest in saying that this is bullshit. There's no reason.
What about that? What about after Adams Fox's big contract, he gets another little 3 or 4 year, and then after that contract, his worth is maybe more than what we could sign him for, but he loves New York and he's been there, so he signed for $1.5 million.
I'll tell you what, by then the rule will already be changed and they'll call it the Adam Fox rule. So it's not really something that I'm worried about, but I feel like that Bergeron highlights maybe some suspiciousness that's going on in the NHL, because I don't think it would be right to be able to get rid of all that Panarin Fox money and then just say, yeah, come on back for like Hedel dollars, and then we still have this other team we have. I think everyone in the league would actually panic the same way they did when we won the draft lotto somehow twice in a row. So, did the Bruins get better? Somehow they did, because they were able to.
Yeah, but they still have a new coach, so you don't know what's really going to happen there. He brings in a new style that those older players haven't seen. So that should be.
Yeah, but I think the team is really good, and I don't think that they're going
and what
to.
About their goalkeeping?
Yeah, I feel like let me touch on that. I feel like they're not going to be the Bruins team that we've seen, but those moves have made them stay relevant. And the same way that the Penguins and the Caps will always be relevant as long as they ice that core, I think that this was the biggest offseason. And other than that, you strip it, because if those guys walk, you're done, I feel like. So we'll see. I think the Bruins somehow put it all together, and they're a better team in the long run. The Penguins, are they a better team? Probably not. Hopefully their days are done of being a perennial contender. I would love a year where they're actually having to try.
I don't know. Crosby still look good, so that team still could be relevant. Malkin's back. The core three's still there. I think you get Jari back if he can stay healthy. You feel like as the GM there, you have a chance.
We have to talk about the Blue Jackets. They're a much better team and they added a top 10 player in the league, a superstar in Johnny Gaudreau. I mean, he's definitely a top 10 wing if he's not a top 10 player. And I feel like you're
maybe
really
Patrick Laine gets a little better for them, has had
really banking
more
on
of a better season for them.
You're really, really banking on, like you said, a bounce back year for Laine and maybe for those two to form a nice deadly combination. But
what about the Senators? We didn't really talk about the Sens as much.
They must be that must be the top improved team, man. I feel like nobody did what they did. Nobody got as aggressive as they did. Gaudreau not Gaudreau. Giroux is a absolutely elite playmaking center, and he's going to make them a better team. You got really exciting guys already to be, if you're an Ottawa fan, you got to be really excited about Tkachuk and Stützle moving forward, and Josh.
Well, they haven't had anything in 5 years to be excited about,
I hate to harp on how much I love the Tkachuks, but Brady really does represent. Brady is like what I want Brendan Othman to look like, and maybe not to the point production level, but I want that really tenacious, nasty type of player who's going to make the game hard for you, and then also score a goal, and then he's going to tease you about it, and then he's going to go out and make the next shift hard for you. So I would really look for the Ottawa Senators to. I mean, they got a goalie, they got DeBrincat as a bona fide sniper, so they're going to be scary, man. Look out, and especially because I don't think that.
They get the respect they deserve.
I don't think that guys like Shabbat get the respect they deserve. I don't think that whole franchise, like you said, has not had anything to really think about and talk about. So the buzz is going to be real, and especially if they can string together a couple wins, that fan base is going to be so damn excited. I mean, you remember back in the Hamburglar days was the last thing that they really had to get stoked on. So I hope that the Ottawa, for what it's worth, I hope they have a good year, and I think that we have to put them in the conversation of one of the most improved teams in the league for sure.
Definitely.
All right, prospect-wise, is that where we're at?
Yeah, we're on the prospect now, Steve. So who you looking forward to coming to play this year?
Man, the more I watch Adam Sakura talk about a pest who can make you pay for it, I really like what he brings. I think that when we get into the time of year where it starts to be, call ups and injuries, and if it's not this season that we see him, because it does look like he's going back to his country when the season starts. Down the road, these are those spark plug type of players that you need to inject into a lineup. You can talk about Chris Kreider joining the team in the playoffs and doing what he did and bringing that energy and being born into the Rangers the way that he was. I would look for a guy like Adam Sikora to sort of immediately insert himself into the conversation as like, no, I'm a name that you really ought to know. I think Brendan Othman gets all that attention because of the draft slot, but you can't discredit his all-around ability. I think watching some of the highlights from the IHF Worlds has just been
it's been mind-blowing watching some of those moves. Like, I cannot wait to see it.
I think to me is his all-around game. When he's in tight and he had that beautiful move through his legs, he demonstrates the hand, he tucks it far down in a 2-second window is a gorgeous play. But all around, he's making the hits, he's diving below the net, he's cycling pucks, he's getting secondary assists. He's really showing that, he can kind of play wherever. And a lot of these plays that he's making, kind of very similar to the way we saw Laugh this last season, is he's doing it and sort of cycling back over to his off wing as well, maybe trying to prove a point that, I can really be a Swiss Army knife and play wherever you'd like me to. And man, if he was just a week older, I think we would see him in an AHL jersey this season. But
which would have been great for injuries barring like a call up of that. Yeah. I'm excited for Kravy because I think for Kravy, it's you got to prove it. We kept things kosher, made sure we didn't trade him. Who knows? Maybe we trade him, but it's kind of prove who you are. You want to be that good? You don't want to play in the AHL? Go back, play in KHL, come back. Show us what you got, baby. That's what I'm looking forward to most.
I've been looking at a lot of old highlights of Kravy, and one thing I will say is we really need a trigger man. We need someone to shoot the puck. And if you want to send the message that you're here to learn and that you're here to adapt a different style, I know that he's going to want to touch the puck, put some little move onto it, and do that extra move. But if he can adapt to that NHL style and just start to get some pucks on the net, we've always seen the way that guys who can start to score start to feed off of that momentum and start to realize that, and believe in their own shot. And Buchnevich is a guy that comes to mind that had to be told more often than not, you got to shoot the puck, you got to believe in your shot, and you have to have confidence that when the puck's coming your way, that's why it's coming your way. It's that we want you to put it on the net. So Kravtsov, to me, that's going to be the separation from him having a good year or not, is if he can get that idea in his head to shoot the puck. Because if you can get everyone else thinking shoot, that's when you put on that move, man, and you're going to –
we were terrible in 5-on-5 last year, so I'm looking for a spark of somewhere. Trocheck, Kravy, one of the younger guys getting a little bit more experience, shoot first, and, that just builds the rest of the team around them. If you're seeing a guy shooting, shoot first, and maybe one of those Trouba clappers will actually fall. Because all year I'm like, Trouba from the blue line, and it's right to the goalie's middle.
Well, the idea is still the same, and you got to get it to the net. You got to put
No, I like it. I just want some of them to fall.
Think about the Rangers teams we've had to root for in the past that, all those extra moves. And, I don't know how many times I've been screaming at my television for them to shoot it.
Later, Mark Stahl, all right, just get rid of the puck, Mark. It's okay.
Yeah, sometimes to me, especially when these European guys come over, they want to handle that thing. I would love to see them just throw it on the net and see what magic can happen from it. Because again, you start to get a couple goals behind you, and maybe you start to get that little pep in your step to go out there and try to prove something to these coaches. But it's fun as always, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Always fun. Thanks, Steve.
Cheers, brother.
Go Rangers.
Let's go Rangers.